Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, Eternal Roots, by Tanya Wunsti. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin part 1. The bus came to a screeching halt on a dusty, winding road surrounded by dense forest. The students of Class 1A stumbled out, stretching their legs after the long ride. The forest stretched endlessly around them, vibrant and wild, as though untouched by time. The sunlight barely broke through the thick canopy of trees, giving the area a mysterious glow. At the edge of a steep cliff, their homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa, stood with his usual disinterested expression. He turned to face the class, still wrapped in his yellow sleeping bag. "We've arrived," he said flatly. Katsuki Bakugo crossed his arms, scowling. "Where exactly have we arrived? There's nothing here but trees." "Don't be stupid, Bakugo," Tenya Ida said, pushing up his glasses in his signature, overzealous manner. "This is clearly the designated location for our training camp. I'm sure it's been carefully selected for optimal physical and mental growth." "Blah, blah, blah," Bakugo muttered. Before anyone could ask more questions, a voice rang out from behind them. "Welcome, you, students." The class turned to see 4 figures standing at the edge of the cliff. The wild Pussycats had arrived. Pixie Bob stepped forward, hands on her hips. "We're the wild Pussycats. Pro-heroes specializing in mountain rescue and wilderness survival. This forest is our base of operations, and for the next week, it's your training ground. Don't forget to introduce me, Pixie Bob." Ragdoll said, bouncing excitedly. "I'm Ragdoll, and I'll be watching you all very closely." He. Mandalay smiled at the group. "It's nice to meet you all. We've designed this training camp to push you beyond your limits. By the end of it, you'll be a whole new class of heroes." Tiger flexed his muscles, striking a dramatic pose. "You're going to love it or maybe you won't. Either way, get ready to work." The students murmured among themselves, a mix of excitement and trepidation filling the air. "Now," Mandalay said with a sly grin, "it's time to get started." Before anyone could ask what she meant, Pixie Bob stomped her foot. The ground beneath the students cracked and rumbled. "What the?" Kirishima yelped as the earth beneath them crumbled away. "What is this?" Kaminari screamed, flailing as the ground collapsed into a steep slope that sent the students tumbling down toward the forest below. "You'll thank me later." Pixie Bob called after them, laughing as the class disappeared into the trees. Aizawa sighed, rubbing his temples. "They're in your hands now. Don't let them die." The students landed in an overgrown section of the forest, dazed but unharmed. The air was thick with humidity, the sounds of rustling leaves and distant bird calls filling their ears. "What kind of training is this?" Mina Ashido groaned, brushing dirt off her uniform. "Focus," Ida said, straightening his tie. "We've clearly been placed in a survival scenario. We must proceed with caution and," a muddy, gurgling noise interrupted him. The students turned to see a large, humanoid creature made entirely of mud lurching toward them. Its blank, hollow eyes oozed with muck as it roared, raising a heavy, dripping arm. "What the hell is that?" Kaminari shouted, sparks already crackling from his fingertips. "Does it matter?" Bakugo snarled, his palms igniting. "It's going down." The class launched into action, quirks lighting up the forest. Todoroki froze part of the creature solid, while Bakugo's explosions blasted chunks of it apart. The mud monsters, however, seemed endless. Each time one fell, another rose from the earth, groaning and lurching toward the students. As they fought, an uneasy feeling settled over the group. "Does anyone else feel like we're being watched?" Jairu asked, her ear jacks twitching as she scanned the area. Kirishima slashed through a mud monster with his hardened arms, panting. "Yeah, I felt it too. It's like there's something out there." "Don't be paranoid," Bakugo growled, blasting another creature into smithereens. "Probably just the Pussycats watching us screw up." But the feeling persisted. It wasn't just paranoia, it was as though the forest itself had eyes, silently observing their every move. High above, hidden among the leaves, a lone figure crouched on a sturdy branch, watching the battle unfold. His green eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the light of the student's quirks. The plants around him whispered their thoughts, intrigued by the newcomers. "I seem to have guessed. They are an interesting bunch of younglings," the figure murmured, his voice so soft it blended with the rustling leaves. "But reckless. What are they teaching children nowadays? It's been a while since I had this many visitors in my forest." The forest around him seemed to hum in agreement, the vines curling slightly in approval or perhaps anticipation. He leaned back against the tree trunk, a small smile playing on his lips. For now, he would simply watch. As long as they didn't bring harm to his forest, he would continue doing what he had done for centuries, observing. Part 2. The atmosphere at the camp was lively as Class 1A finally arrived after their grueling trek through the forest. Dinner was served, and the students eagerly dug in, their exhaustion giving way to chatter and laughter. It was then that a small figure caught their attention, a child sitting quietly at the edge of the camp alongside the wild Pussycats. "Hey, who's that?" Kaminari asked, gesturing toward the boy. "Oh, that's Kota," Mandalay explained, her voice warm but tinged with a hint of sadness. "He's my nephew. He's been staying with us for a while now." Intrigued, Kirishima got up, his trademark enthusiasm on full display. "All right. Time to make a new friend," he declared, marching over to the boy. But the moment Kirishima tried to introduce himself, Kota's response was a swift kick to the groin. Kirishima doubled over with a pained grunt as Kota glared at him, his small fists clenched. "I don't want to make friends with a bunch of hero wannabes," Kota shouted, his voice sharp with anger and bitterness. Without another word, he stormed off into the forest, leaving the students in stunned silence. Kaminari, recovering first, let out a nervous laugh. "Man, that kid's like a mini Bakugo." Bakugo scoffed, crossing his arms. "TCH. As if. He's got that whole 'I'm not here to make friends' vibe," Kaminari said, mimicking Bakugo's scowl. "No, that's Todoroki," Shiro interjected, referencing their first day in the hero course when Todoroki announced he wasn't there to make friends during introductions. The mentioned individual was quietly sipping his cold soba, completely unbothered. The group resumed their dinner, but a shadow of curiosity and concern lingered over the encounter. Kota, meanwhile, had retreated to his secret hideout, a quiet spot on a cliff overlooking the forest, where he could sit and brood in peace. Unbeknownst to him, he wasn't alone. Hidden among the trees, the mysterious figure observed the child with a thoughtful expression. Ever since Kota had come to live in the forest, the figure had been quietly watching over him, sensing the sadness that clung to the boy like a second skin. "He's so small, yet he carries so much sorrow," the figure murmured, his voice blending seamlessly with the rustling leaves. His green eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, filled with a quiet understanding. "Losing his parents at such a young age must have been hard. Not that I can relate. A human child needs to eat if they are to grow." With a soft hum, he extended his influence through the forest. Birds fluttered from the canopy, and squirrels darted along the branches, responding to his unspoken command. They gathered small, ripe berries, carefully plucking them from bushes and trees, and carried them delicately in their beaks and paws. The forest seemed to move with purpose, its inhabitants working in harmony under the figure's guidance. Kota sat at the edge of the cliff, knees hugged tightly to his chest. The first bird landed nearby, tilting its head curiously before placing a plump berry at his feet. Kota flinched, startled by the sudden appearance, but as more animals emerged, each depositing their gifts around him, his surprise gave way to quiet wonder. This wasn't the first time the forest's creatures had come to him. They always appeared when he felt his lowest, as if they sensed his loneliness. Usually, they stayed close, offering silent companionship as he sat on the cliff, staring into the distance. Sometimes, they let him pet them, their soft fur and feathers comforting in a way no words could match. But this was new. "Thank you," Kota whispered, his voice trembling slightly as he picked up the berries. He didn't know why the animals had chosen to bring him food this time, but his stomach, which had been growling for hours, was grateful. "I thought I was going to go hungry tonight. I didn't want to go back and eat with those wannabe heroes." He hesitated, glancing at the animals that watched him with curious, gentle eyes. A squirrel chittered softly, nudging another berry toward him. His lips curved into a small, reluctant smile. "You always show up when I need you most. I don't know how you do it, but thanks. Whoever you are." He glanced at the dark forest beyond the cliff, as though expecting an answer from its depths. Only the sound of rustling leaves and chirping crickets replied, but it was enough. As Kota ate, the quiet companionship of the animals soothed the ache in his chest. The sorrow that had weighed on him since arriving at the camp began to lift, replaced by a fragile but genuine peace. High above, concealed within the shadows of the trees, the figure observed in silence. His faint smile deepened as he leaned back against the rough bark of a towering oak. "For now, this will do," he murmured, his voice low and calm. "He's still a child, after all. Let him find his strength in his own time." The forest around him seemed to hum in agreement, its ancient rhythm steady and unchanging. The figure's glowing green eyes softened as he continued to watch over the boy, a quiet guardian in the night. Part 3 Class 1B's trip to the training camp began smoothly. Their bus had separated from Class 1A's as they neared the secret location, the Wild Pussycats base. Unlike their sister class, they didn't face any surprises or challenges on the way. They were escorted to a part of the forest that was deemed safe and set up camp for the night before proceeding to the main site the following day. The forest, said to be protected by the Pussycats' quirks, felt both mysterious and alive. Pixie Bob's golems patrolled the area as silent sentinels, and Mandalay's telepathic awareness ensured no threats would go unnoticed. The students felt relatively secure under such safeguards, even in the thick and unfamiliar wilderness. Despite this, Monoma found a reason to complain. "I bet Class 1A is getting some kind of special treatment," he muttered, his tone dripping with irritation. "Monoma, give it a rest," Kendo sighed, lightly smacking him on the back of the head. "Focus on yourself for once, comparing yourself to Class 1A isn't going to make you stronger." Monoma scoffed, throwing his arms up. "I'm not comparing myself to them, I already know we're superior. I just find it suspicious that they're nowhere to be seen. For all we know, they're getting some special treatment while we're stuck out here roughing it. Didn't they leave earlier than us?" Suburaba pointed out, adjusting the strap of his bag. "Maybe they're already at the campsite. Or maybe they're facing some kind of challenge." Kodai said quietly, earning a few curious glances. "Challenge?" Pony asked, tilting her head in confusion. Kodai nodded, her expression calm but serious. "The Pussycats are known for pushing people out of their comfort zones. They wouldn't let us have an easy trip, would they? If Class 1A's bus separated from ours, it's probably because they're being tested right now." The idea seemed to settle over the group. Some looked uneasy, while others seemed excited by the thought. "If they're being tested, we'll probably get something similar tomorrow," Tetsu said confidently. "Bring it on. Whatever they throw at us, Class 1B can handle it." As the students continued to talk among themselves, Ibra Shiozaki walked a little behind the group, her expression thoughtful. From the moment they had entered the forest, she had felt an unsettling presence. It wasn't threatening, exactly, more like an invisible weight pressing down on her senses. The trees seemed to whisper something just out of reach, and the air carried a strange energy that made her vines stir unconsciously. She glanced around at her classmates, but no one else seemed to notice. Their relaxed expressions and easy banter didn't match the tension she felt in her chest. Was it only her? Ibra placed a hand over her heart, closing her eyes briefly. "This forest, something about it feels alive. But not in the way forests usually are. It feels like we're being watched." Her thoughts were interrupted by Rin shouting, "Hey, does anyone else think this forest looks like something out of a movie? Like the kind where a monster jumps out and Rin." Kendo cut him off sharply. "Don't freak everyone out. Relax, Kendo," Rin said, grinning as he mimed clawing at the air. "I'm just saying, if something did jump out, I'd totally be ready to take it down. That's the spirit." Tetsu cheered, clapping Rin on the back. "Don't encourage him," Kendo muttered under her breath. Monoma, meanwhile, smirked. "Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if something did attack us. The forest is probably rigged with traps, and the Pussycats are just waiting for us to let our guard down. Unlike Class 1A, we'd actually handle it with grace." Pony tilted her head. "You really think Class 1A can't handle themselves?" Monoma shrugged. "Oh, I'm sure they'll survive barely." "That's enough, Monoma," Kendo warned, her tone firm. "Let's focus on setting up camp and preparing for tomorrow. No one's getting special treatment here. We're all here to train." As the class got to work setting up their tents and organizing their supplies, Ibra found herself stealing glances at the dark forest beyond their campsite. The strange feeling hadn't gone away, if anything, it had grown stronger. She crouched beside one of the golems, her vines brushing against the ground as if to sense what lay beneath the surface. "Ibra, everything okay?" Yosetsu asked, noticing her distracted expression. She hesitated before standing and offering a small smile. "Yes. I'm just taking in the surroundings. It's appealing, don't you think?" Yosetsu raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Yeah, I guess. A little creepy, though." Ibra didn't respond. She didn't want to alarm her classmates, but the forest's presence was undeniable to her. Hidden among the trees, the mysterious figure watched with mild amusement. His glowing green eyes lingered on Ibra for a moment longer than the others. "Interesting, so, she can sense me, looking at her appearance it makes sense," he murmured, his voice blending with the rustling leaves. "But no matter, I've no intention of interfering with them. For now, they'll remain my guests." With a faint smile, he leaned back against the tree trunk, content to observe the group as they settled in for the night. Part 4 Class 1A's training began bright and early at 5:30 a.m., with their homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa, waking them from their slumber. A chorus of groans echoed across the camp as students reluctantly dragged themselves from their beds, complaining about being up earlier than usual. "Can't we train at a more reasonable time?" Denki grumbled, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Shota, unimpressed by their whining, gave them a flat look. "Heroes don't get the luxury of sleeping in when lives are at stake. Get moving." Once assembled, Aizawa wasted no time diving into the purpose of the camp. "The main objective here is reinforcement training," he explained. "The goal is to push your limits, upgrade your quirks, and prepare you for your temporary hero licenses." To demonstrate, he turned to Katsuki Bakugo. "Bakugo, you're up. Throw the pitch." With a confident smirk, Katsuki stepped forward, ready to show off. Activating his quirk, he hurled the ball with a powerful explosion. The class watched as the ball soared, leaving a trail of smoke in its wake. When the distance was revealed 6 meters, some of Class 1A looked stunned. "Wait, that's it," Mina whispered, leaning toward Kirishima. "I thought it'd be way more by now." Even Katsuki frowned at the result, clearly dissatisfied. Shota took the opportunity to address the class. "This minor increase shows something important. While you've gained valuable experience and emotional resilience, especially after the villain attack at the USJ, it's clear that your physical growth has stagnated. That ends now. From today onward, we'll focus on strengthening your quirks. No excuses." Class 1B arrived shortly after, their bus pulling up to the Pussycats' base. Led by their teacher, the BLD hero, Vlad King, the students filed out, eager yet apprehensive about what lay ahead. Vlad wasted no time setting expectations. "You're all here to push your quirks to the limit," he announced. That's how we'll make them stronger. No shortcuts, no half measures. This training camp is about building both skill and endurance. Class 1B couldn't help but glance toward Class 1A, who had already begun their grueling exercises. The sight was intimidating. Katsuki practiced his explosions in boiling water, sweat pouring down his face. Todoroki alternated between creating massive waves of ice and intense bursts of fire, his body straining with effort. Achiko worked on maintaining her zero gravity for longer PRDS, fighting through nausea. Are we really expected to train like that? Kaibara muttered, his skepticism loud enough for his classmates to hear. Vlad overheard and shot him a warning glance. Doubt won't get you anywhere, Kaibara. Focus on your own progress. Before anyone could voice further concerns, the Pussycats made their grand entrance. Mandalay, Pixie Bob, Ragdoll, and Tiger introduced themselves with exuberant energy, explaining their quirks and how they'd assist in training. The students were then divided into smaller groups, each given tailored exercises to improve their quirks. From endurance drills to precision-based challenges, the camp quickly became a scene of focused chaos. High above, concealed in the dense canopy of trees, a mysterious figure observed the activity below. His piercing green eyes scanned the scene, noting the students' struggles and determination. Even after centuries, the world hasn't changed, he mused, his voice low and tinged with melancholy. Turning children into soldiers, forcing them to fight battles they should never have to face. Look at what they're doing to my appealing forest. I will forgive them as long as they don't destroy everything. His gaze drifted to a small figure standing quietly behind a tree. It was Kota, watching the students with an unreadable expression. His arms were crossed, and his usual scowl was firmly in place. The figure tilted his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. Even in silence, the boy watches closely. As the sun climbed higher, casting its warm glow over the forest, the training camp continued in full swing, unaware of the quiet guardian observing from the shadows. Part 5. Okay, for real, guys, is the forest haunted? Kaminari asked his usual group of friends as they prepared dinner. His voice carried a mix of nervousness and curiosity, earning a few raised eyebrows. When his friends pressed him for details, Kaminari explained that he'd seen a shadowy figure moving among the trees the previous night when he'd gone out to relieve himself. The others exchanged uneasy glances, and someone chimed in, saying they'd been hearing strange noises during the night, creaks, rustles, and even whispers. Another student mentioned how, at times, the forest seemed to shift, with trees growing denser and pathways narrowing, almost as if the forest itself was blocking their way. TCH. You're all just a bunch of scared brats, Bakugo scoffed, crossing his arms. It's just a DMN forest. Stop freaking out over nothing. And keep cutting those onions, they won't cut themselves. Despite Bakugo's harsh dismissal, the conversation continued. The students eagerly shared their unsettling encounters, fleeting shadows, rustling sounds with no clear source, and even the eerie sensation of being watched. The tension in the air grew as more stories surfaced, their voices hushed as if afraid the forest might overhear. Unbeknownst to them, the mysterious figure lurking in the forest had been intentionally toying with them. He considered it a bit of harmless fun to liven things up and perhaps a small punishment for the damage their training had inflicted on his precious trees. He would subtly manipulate the environment, thickening the forest canopy to obscure paths, creating strange noises with the rustling of leaves, and even sending animals scurrying at opportune moments to spook the students. Occasionally, he would send small animals to misplace objects, like socks or tools, just to further unnerve them. Perched high in the treetops, the figure chuckled softly to himself, watching the students grow increasingly uneasy. They come here, trampling through my forest, and yet they dare call it haunted, he murmured, his green eyes gleaming with amusement. If they're going to disturb my peace, they might as well entertain me. For him, this was a rare opportunity to indulge in some light-hearted mischief. Visitors were uncommon in this part of the forest, and he couldn't resist the chance to have a little fun with the intruders, especially if it meant keeping them on edge as a reminder to respect the forest. As the group continued their uneasy discussion, the forest seemed to grow quieter, as if holding its breath, and the students couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching them. Part 6 Katsuki Bakugo was always angry, no surprise there. But lately, he was nearing his breaking point. Ever since Kaminari had come up with that stupid theory about the forest being haunted, small, annoying, and increasingly unfortunate events had been plaguing him. First, there was the mysterious tripping. He could swear the path had been clear, but somehow, a tree root always seemed to appear just in time to send him sprawling. Then there were the squirrels. Those dmed, bushy-tailed menaces had been stealing his food right out of his hands. Spicy food. Could squirrels even eat spicy things? It didn't make sense, and Bakugo was certain he hadn't done anything to deserve their wrath. Or had he? Let's rewind to a few hours ago. Bakugo had just finished an intense training session, hurling explosions to test his precision and range. Exhausted, he began making his way back to camp from the clearing where he'd been practicing. The forest was quiet, eerily so, but Bakugo paid it no mind, too focused on his growling stomach and the ache in his muscles. Then, without warning, a bird decided to perch on his head. At first, he froze, his crimson eyes twitching as the tiny creature nestled into his spiky blonde hair like it was some kind of nest. "Oi, get off me, you feathered idiot," he barked. The bird responded with a cheerful chirp-chirp, as if mocking him. The chirping continued, grating on Bakugo's already frayed nerves. "I said, get off." Fed up, he unleashed a series of small explosions to shoo the bird away, cursing loudly as it fluttered off with an indignant squawk. Satisfied, he dusted off his hands and continued his trek. Unbeknownst to Bakugo, this small act had sealed his fate. High above, hidden among the trees, the forest's mysterious guardian had been watching. With glowing green eyes and a soft chuckle, the figure shook his head. "This young one, such a temper," the figure murmured, leaning against the trunk of a massive tree. "Throwing fire at creatures smaller than him. He has much to learn about respect." From that moment on, the guardian decided to teach this blonde youngling a lesson. The first act of retribution was subtle. A few tree roots shifted just enough to trip Bakugo on his way back to camp. He hit the ground hard, cursing the forest and its stupid, uneven paths as he scrambled to his feet. Next came the squirrels, who made it their mission to steal every scrap of food Bakugo brought out. Whether it was his lunch, his snacks, or even his precious spicy meat skewers, nothing was safe from their tiny, determined paws. "Dmnit. Bakugo roared, glaring daggers at the furry thieves as they scurried off with his food. "What did I do to deserve this? Come back here, you little..." No matter how loudly he yelled or how threatening his tone, the animals were utterly unfazed. If anything, they seemed to grow bolder, as though plotting their mischief together. "Dmn, Bakubro," Kirishima said with a chuckle, watching the chaos unfold. "I don't know what you did to those animals, but they've got it out for you. Those evil little BSTRDS just want to mess with me." Bakugo snapped, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. "When I catch them, I'm gonna screw them up." Kirishima tried to stifle his laugh but failed, shaking his head. "I don't think they care about your threats, man. It's like they've got a personal vendetta against you." From high above, concealed in the canopy of trees, the forest's mysterious guardian observed the scene with quiet amusement. The faintest smile played on his lips as he rested against a branch, arms crossed. "Perhaps this will teach him to appreciate the little creatures," the figure mused, his glowing green eyes glinting with mischief. "And maybe even control that temper of his." He leaned forward slightly, the leaves around him rustling softly. A little chaos never hurt anyone except maybe his pride. The figure's green eyes narrowed slightly as he added, "Though he really should stop blowing things around. I'll have to keep an eye on him." Meanwhile, Bakugo stomped through the forest, fuming and muttering under his breath. "Stupid haunted forest. Stupid squirrels. Stupid bird. When I find out who's behind all this, they're dead." Dead. And so, the young hothead continued his battle with the forest, unaware that every step, every stumble, and every stolen snack was orchestrated by the very trees around him, trees guided by a watchful, mischievous guardian intent on teaching him a valuable lesson. Part 7. The guardian found himself intrigued by this human. Unlike the others, this one was always on edge, his sharp red eyes flashing whenever he sensed something amiss. The way his wild, dark hair seemed to rise slightly whenever he used his quirk was that a side effect. It gave him an almost feral quality, though the guardian couldn't help but wonder, doesn't he ever sleep? Those dark circles under his eyes were practically a second shadow. He'd seen a purple-haired human with a similar look once. Were they related? From his perch in the trees, the guardian observed the man with quiet curiosity. He's perceptive, I'll give him that. But he's pushing himself too hard. Humans are so fragile when they neglect themselves. Meanwhile, Shota Aizawa moved through the forest, his senses heightened and his nerves stretched thin. There it was again, that faint prickling on the back of his neck, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. He spun around, eyes scanning the dense foliage, only to find nothing but the occasional bird or squirrel darting out of sight. He sighed, his grip on his scarf tightening. I'm losing it, he muttered under his breath. His fellow heroes had dismissed his unease during their earlier discussion, each offering their own perspective. Come on, Aizawa, Mandalay said, crossing her arms. I used my telepath quirk to check in with everyone nearby. I sensed nothing out of the ordinary. Pixie Bob chimed in, leaning against a tree. And my mud golems. They haven't encountered a single suspicious thing. If someone was creeping around, they'd sniff them out right away. You know how reliable they are. Tiger gave him a reassuring pat on the back. You're probably just overthinking it. The forest can mess with your head if you're not used to it. All the dense trees and shadows make everything seem closer than it really is. Ragdoll grinned, bouncing on her heels. Plus, my search quirk hasn't picked up anyone unusual in the area. I've got all your locations locked in. It's just us, Shota. Aizawa, however, remained unconvinced, his sharp gaze flicking toward the treetops. Maybe. Or maybe whoever's out there knows how to avoid detection. Pixie Bob rolled her eyes. You're paranoid. The only thing lurking out there is a couple of squirrels looking for snacks. Yet, even with all their reassurances, the feeling persisted, gnawing at him like an itch he couldn't scratch. Perhaps it was the students' incessant chatter about the forest being haunted. Rumors and nerves were contagious, especially among kids with overactive imaginations. Still, Shota wasn't one to believe in ghosts. And yet he couldn't shake the notion that something or someone was out there. Watching. Waiting. Part 8. The daily life of an immortal guardian of the forest. Morning always began the same way. The first rays of sunlight broke through the dense canopy, warming the earth and stirring the creatures of the forest. Birds chirped their morning greetings, their melodies weaving through the air like a gentle symphony. Good morning to you too, the guardian murmured in reply, his voice soft yet resonant, a part of the forest itself. Did he need sleep? No. Not in the way mortals did. But he loved the simple gesture of closing his eyes, letting the weight of his eternal responsibilities slip away, even if only for a few fleeting hours. It wasn't necessity, it was indulgence. Once awake, his second ritual called. He sought out a sunlit clearing, where the light cascaded like liquid gold through the trees. There, he basked in its glory, surrounded by the plants and animals of his domain. They came to him with their stories, a fox recounting a narrow escape, birds chattering about newcomers, even the trees whispering in the wind about the changes in the soil. He listened carefully, counting their numbers, ensuring balance. Their ecosystem was fragile, and his touch though light was vital. Next came the trees. Oh, the trees! His pride and joy. He walked among them, inspecting their branches and trunks, feeling the life that pulsed within. With a touch of his hand, he infused them with energy, coaxing them to grow taller, stronger. New saplings were planted with care, their roots nestled in the earth he nurtured. As he stepped back to admire his work, he couldn't help but feel like a proud father watching over his flourishing children. But not all was serene. The humans, though few, were a presence he had learned to tolerate. Those who respected the forest's laws were left in peace. He observed them from afar, noting their care for the land. Among them was a youngling, a boy with a sadness etched deep into his soul. The guardian couldn't ignore it. He sent small animals to cheer the boy, hoping their soft fur and curious antics would coax a smile. Children, he thought, should not carry such burdens. And then there were the others. The trespassers. The poachers. Those who entered his domain with malice in their hearts and greed in their eyes. For them, there was no mercy. The forest itself turned against them, roots tripping their steps, branches clawing at their clothes. If they vanished, well, the forest kept its secrets well. Recently, though, his forest had become alive with new energy. The young heroes. A bustling group of vibrant, reckless, and noisy humans training within his domain. They were different. They respected the land, though they tested its patience with their explosive powers and clumsy footprints. And so, a new task had been added to his daily routine, observing them. Ensuring they stayed within bounds, that their actions didn't disrupt the delicate balance of his home. They were full of life, brimming with potential. But if they stepped out of line, the guardian was always watching. Part 9. The day began like any other. Classes 1A and 1B pushed themselves through grueling training sessions under the watchful eyes of their instructors. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, most of them could barely feel their limbs. Dinner was a welcomed reprieve, the smell of grilled meat and savory rice filling the camp as the students laughed, bantered, and devoured their hard-earned meal. They were just beginning to relax when the wild pussycats gathered everyone around the campfire with mischievous grins plastered across their faces. "All right, everyone. Time for a fun activity," Mandalay announced with enthusiasm that made the exhausted students groan. "Fun activity?" Bakugo scoffed, leaning against a tree. "What kind of torture are you planning now?" "Not torture." Pixie Bob chimed in, clasping her hands together. "It's a test of courage. Class 1B will hide in the forest and try to scare Class 1A. Each pair from Class 1A will enter the forest in turns, and when we rotate, Class 1B will go in, and 1A will do the scaring. The class that gets the most screams wins." "But we've been training all day," Kaminari groaned, slumping dramatically. "Do we have to?" "Heroes don't get to pick when they're exhausted," Mandalay shot back with a wink. "Besides, it's a fun activity to relax to." There were collective groans, a few quiet laughs, and one exasperated "seriously" from Aizawa in the background, but the students reluctantly agreed. High above, the forest's guardian watched with a quiet chuckle. From his perch in the trees, he observed Class 1B disappearing into the dark woods, snickering and strategizing about their scare tactics. The first pair of Class 1A stumbled into the forest shortly after, flashlights barely cutting through the thick shadows. "So, they've turned my forest into a playground," the guardian mused, resting his chin in his hand. His growing green eyes gleamed with amusement. "A game of fear, is it? Should I lend a hand?" His lips curled into a faint smirk. Shota Aizawa dragged Kaminari, Mina, Kirishima, Rikido, and Siro back into the facility for supplementary lessons, intending to teach them how to conduct themselves during a crisis. 12 minutes later, the fifth pair from Class 1A, Ochiko and Tsuyu, entered the forest. "Ribbit," Tsuyu said, her flashlight sweeping across the dark trees. "This is kind of spooky, don't you think?" Ochiko nodded nervously, gripping her flashlight. "Yeah, let's stick close, okay." Deeper in the forest, Juzo, Itsuka, and Yui from Class 1B waited in their hiding spot. "Nice scare earlier, Yui," Juzo whispered, giving her a thumbs up. Itsuka grinned. "Yeah, you're good at this." Before she could finish, a strange, thick smoke began to curl around their feet. It was cold and unnatural, with a faint bluish glow. What's that? Yui asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The smoke rose quickly, and Juzo staggered, his eyes fluttering shut as he collapsed to the ground. Juzo! Itsuka gasped, clamping a hand over her mouth as her instincts kicked in. Yui, don't breathe it in, it's poisonous. She activated her quirk, enlarging her hands to shield Yui and herself from the smoke. But the dense fog spread rapidly, engulfing the area. Back at the camp, the Pussycats and the remaining students saw the first signs of trouble, a plume of black smoke rising from the forest, stark against the moonlit sky. What's going on? Mandalay shouted, her tone sharp as she pointed to the smoke. Ragdoll's eyes widened. That's not normal. Pixie Bob, stay here with the students. Mandalay, let's move. Before they could react further, a section of the forest erupted in blue flames. The blaze roared to life with unnatural speed, liking at the trees and casting eerie shadows that danced across the night. Everyone, stay back. Aizawa barked, his scarf already uncoiling around his shoulders. The students erupted into panicked murmurs as the smoke thickened, its dark tendrils creeping toward the edges of the camp. The trees creaked ominously, and the shadows deepened as the forest came alive, ready to test the intruders who dared to forget that it had a will of its own. Part 10. The Guardian watched in quiet amusement as the younglings stumbled through the forest, attempting to scare each other. Their nervous laughter and startled cries echoed through the trees, blending into the natural symphony of the night. However, as the fifth pair of Class 1A ventured deeper into the woods, a sudden shift in the air sent a chill through him. The forest whispered its warning, urgent and sharp. A tear in the fabric of space had appeared, a swirling purple vortex from which unwelcome guests emerged. The presence was unmistakably vile, laced with malice. His green eyes narrowed as he received the message from the forest itself: intruders had entered. One of them released a sickly purple gas that slithered through the undergrowth, creeping toward the campsite like a predator stalking its prey. Another dared to ignite the trees, and flames roared to life, consuming his precious forest. The Guardian's calm demeanor evaporated, replaced by a smoldering fury. My forest, he growled under his breath, his voice reverberating through the trees. They dare to defile it. The creatures of the forest fled in terror, their cries piercing the night. The intruders' humans seemed unconcerned by the havoc they wreaked, their eyes instead fixed on the young heroes scattered throughout the woods. The Guardian moved swiftly. His first priority was clear: the flames had to be extinguished before they consumed everything. Shota Aizawa, deep in combat with a grotesque villain whose charred skin was held together by staples and scars, felt the shift in the air. The villain wielded blue flames that danced and crackled with deadly intent, setting the forest ablaze around them. What the hell is going on? Aizawa muttered, dodging another burst of fire. Suddenly, the skies opened, and rain began to pour in torrents, snuffing out the flames with a furious hiss. The forest seemed to come alive. The trees creaked and groaned, their branches shifting as if responding to some unseen command. The villain paused, clearly unsettled by the sudden change. What is this? He hissed, his voice laced with confusion. Aizawa seized the moment, his scarf snapping forward like a viper. It coiled around the villain, pulling him forward as Aizawa drove a knee into his gut. Activating his erasure quirk, he watched as the villain's body dissolved into a grotesque pile of mud. He glanced around, his sharp eyes scanning the now eerily still forest. The trees, were they moving? He wasn't sure what he was seeing, but one thing was certain: something isn't right. Meanwhile, the Guardian had just succeeded in summoning the rain to smother the flames when another message reached him. Kota, the youngling who he'd been watching, was in danger. A massive villain had cornered the boy, his towering frame looming over him like a shadow of death. The Guardian's jaw tightened. He rarely involved himself in the affairs of heroes, but when trouble came to his domain, he would not stand idly by. He extended his hand, and the forest responded. Ancient tree ants, their bark-like bodies creaking with every step, emerged from the shadows. "Deal with the other intruders," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "They are not welcome here." The tree ants moved with purpose, their gnarled limbs crashing through the underbrush as they hunted down those who didn't belong. As for the guardian, he turned his attention to Kota. His steps were swift and silent, the forest parting before him as he closed the distance. The villain raised a massive fist, ready to strike the boy, but before it could descend, roots erupted from the ground, wrapping around the villain's legs and arms. The guardian stepped into the clearing, his presence towering and otherworldly. His growing green eyes burned like embers in the dark. "You have trespassed," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to shake the ground. "And you dare to harm what is mine." The villain struggled against the roots, snarling in defiance. "Who the hell are you?" The guardian's lips curled into a faint smile. "I am the forest," he said simply, raising a hand. The roots tightened, dragging the villain into the earth as if the forest itself had swallowed him whole. Kota stared in wide-eyed awe, frozen in place as the figure before him stepped forward. The guardian stood tall, his form cloaked in the ethereal glow of moonlight breaking through the canopy above. His green eyes burned like embers, their gaze piercing yet gentle. His presence felt ancient and otherworldly, as if the forest itself had taken shape and decided to walk among them. The guardian's voice, deep and resonant like the rustling of leaves in a storm, broke the silence. "Don't be afraid, you are safe now, young one." Kota trembled, unable to tear his gaze away. The roots that had dragged the villain into the earth were retreating now, slithering back into the soil as if they'd never existed. The ground looked untouched, yet the air still thrummed with an unseen energy, a reminder of the power that had been unleashed. Thank you," Kota finally managed to whisper, his voice barely audible. His knees felt weak, and his hands gripped the hem of his shirt tightly, unsure of what to do or say in the face of such a being. The guardian knelt before him, his movements deliberate and graceful, like a tree bending in the wind. Up close, Kota noticed details that made the guardian seem both human and not, skin that seemed to shimmer faintly, like bark kissed by the morning dew, and hair that moved as if stirred by an unseen breeze. "There is no need to thank me," the guardian said softly, his green eyes studying Kota with a calm intensity. "You are a part of this forest, just as much as the trees and the creatures that dwell here. It is my duty to protect all who belong." Kota's lips parted, his mind racing with questions. A part of him wanted to run back to camp, to find Aizawa-sensei or Mandalay and cling to the familiarity of their presence. But another part of him, one he hadn't felt in a long time, wanted to stay. It was the same part of him that found comfort in the animals of the forest, the ones who always seemed to know when he needed them most. As if sensing his thoughts, the guardian's gaze softened further. "The rabbits that sit by your side, the birds that sing for you, the fox that waits just beyond the trees," he said, his voice carrying a hint of warmth. "They came because I sent them. You seem to need their company." Kota's eyes widened in astonishment. You sent them." His voice was hushed, tinged with disbelief. Memories flooded his mind, times when he felt alone and scared, only for a small animal to appear and ease his sorrow. He had always thought it was a coincidence, or perhaps a little miracle. But now, knowing it was the guardian's doing, a lump formed in his throat. "I did," the guardian confirmed, rising to his full height once more. His presence seemed even larger now, as if the forest itself bowed to him. A child's heart should not bear such sadness. The forest does not forget those who care for it. Tears welled in Kota's eyes, but he quickly wiped them away, not wanting to seem weak. "Thank you," he said again, this time with more strength in his voice. The guardian gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, and the faintest trace of a smile curved his lips. "Go now," he said gently. "Your relative is waiting for you. The forest will guide your way." As Kota turned to leave, he glanced over his shoulder one last time. The guardian stood still, framed by the shadows of the towering trees, his growing green eyes watching over him. For the first time in a long while, Kota felt a sense of peace, not just because he was safe, but because he knew someone, something, was always looking out for him. The boy disappeared into the trees, the path ahead illuminated by fireflies that danced like stars in the night. Behind him, the guardian remained a silent sentinel, his presence a quiet promise that no harm would come to those who belonged to his domain. Part 11. The students and teachers were locked in heated battle with the villains when, suddenly, towering tree monsters emerged from the forest, their massive forms creaking as they joined the fight against the intruders. Azui was pinned to a tree, her tongue stretched and held in place by a knife. Nearby, Ochako was struggling beneath Toga, who had plunged a syringe-like device into her thigh and was drawing her BLD with an unsettling grin. Before Toga could finish, a tree monster charged at her with terrifying speed, slamming her into a nearby tree with enough force to shake the ground. Toga groaned as she stood, wiping the BLD from her lips. Her eyes darted to the approaching treants, hulking creatures of bark and vines, their forms radiating a primal, ancient energy. "This is no fun," Toga muttered, her lips curling into a pout. The treants extended their vine-like limbs toward her, but Toga flipped backward gracefully, narrowly evading their grasp. Realizing she was outnumbered, she turned and bolted deeper into the forest, disappearing into the shadows. Ochako and Azui remained frozen, their wide eyes fixed on the monstrous tree creatures. Slowly, Ochako staggered to her feet, adopting a defensive stance, but the treants paid her no attention. Instead, they moved on, heading in another direction as if drawn by an unseen purpose. "They just ignored us," Ochako muttered, helping Azui free herself from the knife pinning her tongue. "What was that, Ribbit?" Azui croaked, still shaken. "I don't know," Ochako replied, glancing in the direction the treants had gone. "But they saved us from that villain." As if in response, the forest began to shift, the trees parting to reveal a clear path leading toward safety. The eerie movements left the girls uneasy. "This is all so weird," they both thought, hurrying down the path while keeping an eye on their surroundings. Outside the forest, Mandalay and Tiger were still locked in battle with Spinner and Magna. Tiger exchanged fierce blows with Magna, neither gaining the upper hand, while Spinner's blade kept Mandalay on edge, forcing her to stay on the defensive. Just as Spinner prepared to launch a decisive strike, vines erupted from the ground, wrapping tightly around the villains. Both Mandalay and Spinner froze as a voice echoed through the forest, deep and resonant, coming from every direction at once. "I hate when humans hurt my forest." The ground trembled as a massive tree shot up from nowhere, separating the heroes and villains. Its colossal branches extended to capture the villains, wrapping them tightly in vines until they resembled mummies. On top of the tree stood a figure, bathed in the ethereal glow of the moonlight. The being's long green hair shimmered like leaves in the wind, and his glowing green eyes pierced through the darkness. His attire was unlike anything they had ever seen, reminiscent of a character from a fantasy tale, complete with earthy tones and intricate patterns that blended with the forest. "Who are you?" Mandalay called out, her voice both wary and commanding. "I am the forest," the figure replied, his tone calm yet firm, as though his words carried the weight of centuries. "And I do not appreciate humans making a mess of it." His glowing eyes fixed on the villain struggling against the vines. "I have lived in peace all this time until today. What brings you to disturb my humble abode?" The villains, still bound tightly, glared at him but remained silent. "Oh. You won't answer." The guardian's voice carried a hint of amusement as he tightened the vines, drawing pained grunts from the captives. Spinner was the first to crack. "We're the Vanguard Action Squad of the League of Villains," he spat, struggling against his bindings. "I don't know you, nor do I care," the guardian replied with a shrug. "What business do you have disturbing my peace?" "We're here to capture a kid named Katsuki Bakugo," Spinner admitted through gritted teeth. "Well, too bad for you," the guardian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous tone. "That won't happen. And I do not forgive those who harm what is mine." The vines began to pull Spinner and Magna downward, as though the earth itself intended to swallow them whole. "Stop!" Mandalay shouted, stepping forward. The Guardian turned his glowing green gaze toward her. "Why should I? It's illegal to kill, even if they're villains," Mandalay argued, her voice firm but cautious. The Guardian tilted his head, studying her as if she were an oddity. "Your rules do not apply to me," he said simply. "Then we'll have to stop you," Tiger growled, his body tensing in preparation for a fight. The Guardian's lips curled into a faint, amused smile. "How amusing," he murmured, releasing his hold on the villains. The vines stopped dragging them and loosened slightly, leaving the captives bound but alive. Without another word, the Guardian's form shimmered, fading into the shadows of the forest. The massive tree began to recede, leaving Mandalay and Tiger standing with the subdued villains. Mandalay stared into the darkness where the Guardian had vanished, a shiver running down her spine. "What was that?" she muttered under her breath. Tiger didn't reply. He was too busy staring at the forest, his expression tense. Whatever that being was, it was clear they were dealing with something far beyond their understanding. Part 12. Shoto, Shoji, and Shinso chased the masked villain Mr. Compress to the villain's rendezvous point. Mr. Compress had captured Bakugo and Tokoyami in his marbles. However, as they arrived, the trio was intercepted by a villain with blue flames, Dabi. Shoto quickly raised an icy barrier to block Dabi's attack. In the blink of an eye, Twice appeared behind Shoto, aiming to strike, but Shoto countered with another surge of ice, sending Twice staggering backward. Toga then leapt into the fray, targeting Shinso. Shoji reacted swiftly, slamming Toga away from Shinso with a powerful strike. Meanwhile, Shoto focused on holding off Twice. Amid the chaos, Mr. Compress moved toward Dabi, intending to hand over the captured Bakugo and Tokoyami. However, before he could complete his action, the group found themselves surrounded by tree-like monsters emerging from the forest. "It's them again," Toga muttered, her tone shifting to unease. "Found you," a voice echoed from all directions, sending chills down their spines. The villains frantically looked around, trying to locate the source. "You're the one spreading that hazardous fire in my forest," the voice said as a figure emerged, standing atop the shoulder of one of the towering tree ants. "Who the hell are you?" Dabi demanded, glaring at the figure. The figure smirked, his glowing green eyes full of menace. "Me. You don't need to know who I am because none of you are leaving this forest alive," he said with a murderous gleam in his eyes. Turning to the young heroes, the figure addressed Shoto, Shoji, and Shinso. "Go back to your camp. Your friends are already there." "We can't." Shoto protested. "They've captured our classmates." Twice chimed in, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Are you a hero?" "No, you can't be. You look way too young to be one. We can't take all of them at once." Toga hissed, glancing nervously at the tree ants. "Where are the others?" "We're leaving without them," Dabi snapped, his voice firm and decisive. "No, you won't," the figure said coldly, his expression darkening. The tree ants suddenly moved, their vines and roots stretching out and twisting together to form a massive dome around the area. "You're not leaving this place," the figure declared, his voice brimming with fury. "You'll become part of this forest to atone for your transgression, starting with you." He pointed directly at Dabi, his eyes glowing brighter with malice. Roots erupted from the ground, forcing the villains to dodge. Dabi unleashed a wave of blue flames, burning some of the roots in his path, and charged toward the figure perched on the trent's shoulder. However, with a simple wave of the figure's hand, trees began sprouting from the earth, blocking Dabi's path each time he advanced closer. "I can't get close to him," Dabi growled in frustration, his flames flaring angrily. The ground continued to churn, birthing countless vines that reached out to entangle the villains. Mr. Compress used his quirk to compress any vines that got too close, while Twice created clones, only for them to be crushed into mud by the relentless roots. Meanwhile, Toga slashed at the vines with her knife, darting around to avoid being ensnared. "We can keep this up all night," the figure said, his voice calm yet commanding. "Or you could save yourselves the trouble and surrender. Accept your fate." The three young heroes Shoto, Shoji, and Shinso watched in stunned silence as the mysterious individual effortlessly fought off the League of Villains, controlling the forest with an uncanny ease. Suddenly, Shota, Aizawa, Mandalay, and Tiger arrived on the scene. They were greeted by the sight of a massive dome of vines encasing the area and the remaining members of the League of Villains locked in a desperate struggle against the unknown figure. Part 13. Shota Aizawa didn't know how to process the chaotic scene in front of him. He turned to his three students, his tone sharp but concerned. "Why haven't you gone back to the camp?" Aizawa asked, his eyes narrowing. "And who is that kid fighting the villains?" Shoto was the first to respond. "We were heading back as instructed, but a villain ambushed us and captured Bakugo and Tokoyami. He turned them into marbles, so we chased him here." Shinso added, "We got cornered, and then that kid appeared out of nowhere and started fighting the villains. We don't know who he is." Mandalay spoke next, her tone cautious. "He claimed he's the forest. We encountered him earlier when we were fighting two other villains. He caught them without breaking a sweat. It seems like he controls the forest itself." Tiger nodded, his expression tense. "Don't underestimate him. There's something about his presence it's dangerous. He's not just some kid. This is bad, Dabi." Toga shouted as she dodged more vines lashing toward her. "More heroes are showing up, and Eraserhead is here." Dabi snarled, burning away the vines that encroached on him with a wave of blue flames. "We're retreating," he snapped, pressing a button in his pocket. The Guardian tilted his head slightly, sensing the shift in the air as a swirling purple portal began to materialize behind the villains. His glowing green eyes narrowed. "Verdant surge." His voice was calm yet commanding as the ground trembled. Trees erupted rapidly in a surge, like a tsunami of wood and vines crashing through the dome. When the trees settled, most of the villains lay unconscious, tangled in the sprawling roots. But one villain was missing. Mr. Compress, realizing they wouldn't reach the portal in time, made a desperate decision. He dashed toward Dabi, compressed him into a marble, and hurled the marbles in his possession into Kurogiri's portal just before he was ensnared by the forest's vines. The heroes arrived just in time to see the remnants of the purple swirl from Kurogiri's portal dissipate. Aizawa's sharp gaze scanned the scene, frustrated that he couldn't disable the portal without its user in sight. Meanwhile, the dome of trees glowed faintly as the Guardian's power surged, the forest seeming to react to his every whim. With a wave of his hand, the trees retreated back into the ground, revealing the unconscious forms of Mr. Compress, Toga, and Twice. Vines sprouted from the earth, wrapping around the villains and slowly dragging them into the soil. Before the mysterious figure could finish, Shota Aizawa's capture scarf lashed out, binding the figure in place. Eyes flashing red with his quirk activated, Aizawa commanded, "Stop. You're under arrest for illegal quirk use." The mysterious figure tilted its head, its glowing green eyes locking onto him. Without a word, its form shifted, melting into a tree before reappearing behind him. "And why is that?" it asked, its voice calm and unbothered. Aizawa turned to face the figure, his eyes wide with surprise. His quirk hadn't worked. "I don't know who you are, but using your quirk without a license and trying to bury someone alive is against the law," he answered firmly, his tone carrying a note of warning. The figure seemed to ponder this for a moment before responding. "Why?" Before Aizawa could answer, Shinso spoke up urgently. "Mr. Aizawa, we can't find Bakugo or Tokoyami. The villain's quirk must have deactivated when he passed out, but they're not here." "They aren't here," the mysterious figure interjected nonchalantly. "The masked trespasser threw some marbles into the portal before he was caught in my forest. Too bad the fire user escaped." It turned away, its tone indifferent. "My job here is done." Without waiting for a response, the figure's body shifted again, dissolving into the ground and vanishing, leaving the group speechless. Aizawa's frustration was evident, a tick mark practically visible on his forehead as he clenched his jaw. "Let's head back to the camp," Mandalay interjected, trying to ease the tension. "We'll deal with whoever or whatever that was later. I don't think they'll be leaving this forest anytime soon. The backup team should be on the way by now, and we'll figure out how to proceed and rescue the students who were captured." With a reluctant nod, Aizawa led the group back toward the camp, his mind already working through how to handle the stranger they'd encountered. Part 14. Kurogiri wiped the same glass tumbler for the 9th time, his movements precise and methodical. Across the room, Shigaraki slouched on the couch, the flickering light of the large TV illuminating his haggard face. His fingers twitched restlessly against the controller as he played, muttering curses at the screen. "TCH. What's taking those idiots so long to grab that explosive brat?" he grumbled, his chapped lips curling in irritation. Then, a vibration. Kurogiri's phone buzzed, displaying a notification, a set of coordinates. His cue. "Young MSTR," the Purple Mist bartender announced, slipping the phone back into his pocket. "It seems the squad has completed their mission. I've received their location. Opening the portal now." Shigaraki paused his game, his bloodshot eyes narrowing. "Good. They better bring me good news or else." The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air. With a swirl of darkness, Kurogiri opened the portal. A few seconds later, something passed through, followed by 3 figures materializing all unconscious. The moment the bodies hits the ground, Kurogiri shut the portal behind him. Shigaraki was already on his feet, stepping closer, his gaze sweeping over the unconscious bodies of Dabi, Bakugo and Tokoyami. His fingers twitched, scratching at his neck. "Where's the rest of the cannon fodder?" he demanded, irritation lacing his voice. Kurogiri's calm voice was unwavering. "Seeing as only Dabi and the 2 students made it back, it seems things did not go as planned. But they did secure the target you wanted." Shigaraki grabbed a nearby stool and disintegrating into dust upon contact. "I just got those party members," he seethed, "and you're telling me only one of them survived?" Kurogiri sighed. "We'll have to wait for Dabi to wake up and explain what happened. In the meantime, we should restrain the hostages." After tying Bakugo and Tokoyami to separate chairs, they waited. A groan. A sharp intake of breath. The 2 students stirred, blinking groggily as they realized their predicament. Bakugo's eyes snapped open first, his body tensing against the restraints. "Where the F are we?" he barked, struggling against the ropes. "Good. You're awake," Shigaraki said smoothly. "Welcome to the League of Villains hideout." Bakugo's crimson eyes blazed with defiance. "What the hell do you want?" Shigaraki's lips curled into a grin. "We want you to join us." "As if I'd ever join a bunch of weak-butt villains," Bakugo spat. "I'm gonna be the #1 hero. I'll surpass All Might." Tokoyami, still shaking off the haze, shot Bakugo a wary look. "Perhaps we shouldn't antagonize our captors just yet," he murmured. Shigaraki let out a low chuckle, scratching his neck again. "You will. We've got plenty of time to convince you." Then, his gaze snapped to Dabi. "Now, tell me what the hell happened out there." Dabi exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his dark hair. "Your intel was wrong. Even with our surprise attack, some kid with insane strength showed up out of nowhere. He took down most of the squad by himself." Shigaraki's eyes narrowed. "A hidden boss." Dabi nodded. "We set part of the forest on fire and went after the students and teachers. Everything was going fine until the forest fought back." Shigaraki stilled. "What?" Dabi's jaw clenched. "I'm telling you, the DMN trees started moving. Vines shot up like traps. And then there was this green-haired kid, he showed up standing on some tree monster with legs and locked us inside a dome of vines. When we tried to retreat, he kept coming. Every time I burned his vines, more grew back. If we got close, trees sprouted from the ground to block us. It was like the whole DMN forest was his weapon. When I finally managed to send the coordinates, and the portal opened, he pulled some crazy move suddenly, an entire miniature forest erupted inside the dome. It was chaos. We barely escaped. If Mr. Compress hadn't turned me into a marble at the last second, I'd still be buried under those DMN trees. Shigaraki paced, his mind racing. There's no one at you, with a quirk like that. The closest would be that vine girl from 1B or Kamui Woods, but this is different. Dabi let out a humorless laugh. Whoever that kid was, he didn't just want to stop us, he wanted to bury us alive. Shigaraki's gaze flicked to the two captives. Do you know who he is? Ha! Bakugo scoffed. I don't know any extra like that in our class. In the corner of the room, a small red light blinked on a screen. Someone was listening. A figure in the shadows leaned forward, intrigued by the revelation. Shigaraki's fingers twitched, an eerie grin stretching across his face. You mean, I lost party members and a Nomu. If I find out who this new player is, his voice dropped, dark with promise. I'll turn him into dust. Part 15. 15 minutes after the villain's attack, backup heroes and medics arrived at the camp, their sirens piercing through the chaos that still lingered in the air. The Vanguard Action Squad had left devastation in their wake, 27 injured students, 2 kidnapped, and 1 villain managing to escape into the night. Yet, something was off. Some villains had been captured, others were missing entirely. It was as if something or someone had intervened. The police took those they managed to apprehend into custody, but it did little to shake the bitter truth: they had failed to protect 2 students. And then, there were the reports, strange, inconsistent, unbelievable. A mysterious individual had turned the tide of battle. Accounts from students and pro-heroes alike bordered on the absurd, yet they all told the same story. A figure wreathed in nature itself had emerged amidst the chaos. Trees had moved, roots had risen like hands grasping at the enemy, and a towering creature of wood had stormed through the battlefield, turning the villains' offensive into their downfall. And then, as swiftly as he appeared, he vanished. Detective Naomasa Tsukachi flipped through his notes, expression unreadable. So you're telling me that an unknown individual helped subdue the villains but disappeared the moment anyone tried to question him? His voice was steady, but the weight of the words filled the tense air. Seated around a private meeting room in the camp, the school's most influential figures debated the implications of the night's events. Principal Nizu, ever unreadable, sipped his tea with an unsettling calm. All Might, still in his skeletal form, stood silently, his brows furrowed. Eraserhead, arms crossed, radiated silent disapproval. Present Mike, Midnight, Vlad King, Snipe, Ectoplasm, Recovery Girl, and the wild Pussycats had gathered, the weight of failure heavy on their shoulders. Mandalay was the first to speak. Yes. He appeared just in time to save me and Tiger. If he hadn't, I don't know if we'd still be here. He saved more than just you, Tsukachi said, flipping through his notes. According to multiple testimonies, this unknown individual stopped a significant portion of the attack. Reports mention a monstrous tree-like creature moving on 2 legs, entire sections of the forest turning against the villains. This isn't just a strong quirk, we're looking at something beyond what you, has ever encountered. A quirk capable of manipulating an entire forest, Nizu murmured, his beady eyes gleaming. How fascinating. Nizu, Eraserhead interjected sharply. Whatever you're scheming, now isn't the time. This was an act of vigilantism. No matter how much he helped, he interfered in a hero operation. There have to be consequences. The kid saved a lot of people, Ragdoll argued, shaking her head. I lost consciousness after fighting that chainsaw Nomu. If it weren't for him, I don't know what would have happened to me. And yet, some of the villains' bodies are missing, Eraserhead countered. You call that heroic? It's not black and white, Present Mike said, rubbing his chin. Even if he wasn't acting like a hero, he sure did save lives like one. Instead of debating his motives, Nizu cut in, placing his teacup down with a soft clink. Why don't we simply ask the person in question? A heavy silence fell over the room. What do you mean by that? Midnight asked cautiously. Nizu's smile widened ever so slightly. If this individual is as connected to the forest as the reports suggest, then surely he knows what's happening here, right now. A chill ran down their spines. And then a voice, disembodied yet everywhere, echoed from the shadows of the room. How amusing. Chairs scraped against the floor as the pro-heroes shot to their feet, instinct screaming at them to prepare for battle. Only Nizu remained seated, sipping his tea as though he had been expecting this all along. You, the voice continued, laced with something ancient, something wild. You are not like the others, are you? A creature made of many parts interesting. From the dim corners of the room, vines slithered forth, weaving together like living threads. They twisted and stretched, forming the shape of a throne. And then, sitting atop it as if it had always been his place, was a boy. Messy green hair, eyes glowing an eerie shade of emerald, freckles dusted across sharp cheekbones. An aura unlike anything they had ever felt surrounded him, something primal, something untamed. The mysterious figure leaned forward, resting his chin on his knuckles as he surveyed the room. A smirk ghosted over his lips as his glowing eyes met Nizu's own. Now, he said, voice dripping with amusement, let's talk. Part 16 Q. Eraserhead took a step forward, eyes glowing red as his capture weapon tensed around his shoulders. But before he could get any closer, thick vines erupted from the floor, coiling around him with unnatural precision, restraining his arms and legs in an unbreakable grip. The other heroes instinctively moved to assist, but Nizu raised a single paw, stopping them in their tracks. That's enough. Nizu's voice was calm but firm, his beady eyes gleaming with intrigue. Let's all settle down and talk like civilized beings. At his words, the vines retreated, slithering back into the ground like obedient serpents. Aizawa stumbled slightly but remained tense, his sharp gaze locked onto the mysterious figure before them. The others hesitated before slowly lowering their guard, though unease still thickened the air. The being this so-called guardian leaned back in his vine-woven throne, glowing green eyes flickering with amusement. What is your request, humans? Because I have my own. Nizu folded his paws neatly on the table, maintaining his ever-present smile. I am Nizu, the principal of you, he began with practiced ease. How should we address you? A pause. Then, the being spoke. I am the forest. Or, if you prefer human terms, Izuku. There was a beat of silence before Tsukachi, ever the detective, stood from his chair. I am Naomasa Tsukachi. Would it be possible for you to answer some of my questions? Izuku turned his glowing gaze onto the man in the trench coat, tilting his head slightly, as if studying a curious insect. You must be what humans call law enforcers. His voice carried an old, knowing weight. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. Why do you keep speaking as if you're not human yourself? Izuku's expression remained unreadable as he responded. Because I am not. A sharp intake of breath echoed through the room. I am the forest itself. My purpose is to nurture and protect nature. Aizawa scoffed. So, what? You think you're a god? Izuku merely tilted his head again, as if humoring a child. Now that you all are here, I advise you to leave my forest. Your kind only brings destruction wherever you go. Pixie Bob's eyes widened. What? You can't just kick us out. This property belongs to us. Izuku chuckled, a low, eerie sound. You decided that yourselves. But I am the one who nurtures this land and breathes life into it. Everything here belongs to me. His glowing gaze shifted. Though you four may stay. He nodded toward the wild Pussycats. You have not disrupted the natural order since taking refuge here. All Might frowned, stepping forward. It's not fair to insinuate that this attack was our fault. Izuku turned to him, unimpressed. It is not wise to strain yourself, young one. Your life energy is fading rapidly. If you continue as you are, you do not have much time left. A stunned silence filled the room. The way All Might's expression faltered the shock, the undeniable truth in Izuku's words did not go unnoticed. Nizu cleared his throat, ever the mediator. Let's not blow things out of proportion. He laced his paws together, voice as cheerful as ever. I appreciate your assistance during the attack, but heroes and villains alike will not simply leave you alone after this. I have a proposal. All Might turned sharply. Nizu, you can't be serious. If you assist us in rescuing the 2 students captured by the League of Villains, Nizu continued smoothly, we will ensure that your existence remains hidden from the Hero Public Safety Commission and the media. Furthermore, we will personally see to it that no future attacks threaten your domain. Tsukachi's expression darkened. Keeping this from the HPSC could land you in even more trouble. You're already on thin ice after the last incident. Nizu merely chuckled. A necessary risk. His gaze flicked back to Izuku. I imagine you've lived in relative peace until now. This attack forced you to retaliate to reveal yourself. But if you help us, we can shift attention away from this forest, perhaps even ensure it remains untouched. Silence. Then laughter. A deep, amused sound, rich with something unreadable. Izuku's shoulders shook as he laughed, head tilting back slightly. The sound was neither hostile nor joyful, it was something else entirely. He had watched when the heroes arrived. He had seen them scrambling to tend to the wounded, restraining and transport the remaining villains. He had observed the way they gathered, whispering behind closed doors, grasping for control of a situation they could not comprehend. And now, here they were attempting to strike a deal. How amusing. Izuku's glowing eyes flickered as he studied Nizu, the curious little creature unlike any he had encountered before. You are an interesting one. He leaned forward slightly, the room thick with anticipation. Why should I? Part 17. Even though you seem indifferent to what happens outside your forest, you still care for life itself, Nizu said. Instead of focusing solely on saving the forest, you also saved the students. For a being of your power, it would have been easy to bury everything under the rubble and end the conflict immediately. Izuku's expression grew serious as he looked at Nizu. What? Midnight exclaimed. A being capable of controlling an entire forest wouldn't hesitate to bury everything in it if trouble arose, Nizu continued. That means he had no intention of harming the innocent and deliberately focused only on the villains. But taking a life isn't justified, even if they were villains, All Might argued. Izuku stood up. I appreciate your offer, but I refuse to involve myself in human affairs. I have my own children to protect. Nizu's eyes sharpened. There is a dangerous villain who may come after you. Izuku paused, his gaze narrowing. We suspect a villain who has lived for over a century is connected to today's attack. If any of the surviving villains report what happened here, he might take an interest in your power, Nizu said. All Might tensed and subtly tried to stop Nizu from saying more, but the principal ignored him. What is this villain's name? Izuku asked, his tone cold. He would not allow anyone to disturb his peace. All for one, Nizu answered. He has lived for over 200 years and possesses the ability to steal and bestow quirks. Japan's #1 hero managed to injure him a few years ago, but now he's back, searching for more power. A flicker of something unreadable passed through Izuku's eyes. So that child is still alive, he murmured. The room went silent. Those who knew about One for All stiffened in shock. You've heard of him before? Nizu asked, intrigued. If he dares to disturb my home, I will deal with him, Izuku stated firmly. I have ignored him all this time because human affairs do not concern me. If you'll excuse me, I have a forest to tend to. And with that, he vanished. What just happened? Present Mike muttered. Are we sure that cute kid is as powerful as you say? Midnight asked. He looks like a first-year student. Don't be fooled by appearances, dear, Recovery Girl said. That is no ordinary being. So, are we just going to let him go? Vlad King questioned. For now, Nizu decided. Our priority should be rescuing the 2 captured students and preparing for a press conference to address today's attack. After leaving the heroes behind, Izuku focused on rejuvenating the parts of the forest that had been burned. He had managed to extinguish the flames earlier, but now he needed to heal the trees and restore the forest to its original state. All night, he infused each tree with life energy, slowly mending the damage. Should he help the heroes rescue the 2 younglings? He wondered. Although he had no interest in what happened beyond the forest, the younglings had been taken while they were within his domain. He had watched them over the past few days as they trained. Could he really leave their lives in the hands of villains? He wasn't sure. Part 18 morning arrived, and Izuku found himself basking in the sunlight in his usual clearing, surrounded by the animals. The pro-heroes from UA had left to prepare for the rescue mission, and the forest had returned to its usual quiet atmosphere. Did he miss the playful chatter of the younglings? Maybe. After some time in the sun, he sensed a presence nearby and was informed that Kota was looking for him. When the backup heroes had left, Kota had quietly slipped away, determined to find the boy who had saved him. He had learned that Izuku wasn't part of the hero course or a pro-hero at all, but rather the guardian of the forest. Still, he wanted to thank him for saving his life, for stopping the villain who wanted to hurt him, and maybe, just maybe, for making him understand his parents' sacrifice a little more. He wandered through the trees, calling out, "Mr. Guardian," as he made his way toward his usual hiding place. Eventually, he sat on the cliff overlooking the vast greenery, watching the now thriving forest as if the attack had never happened. "You were looking for me." Kota flinched slightly at the sudden voice. Turning, he saw Izuku standing there, bathed in dappled sunlight, watching him with calm, unreadable eyes. Izuku sat down beside him, and for a while, they simply sat in silence, listening to the wind rustling through the leaves. Then Kota finally spoke. "Thank you for saving me." "There's no need to thank me, young one," Izuku replied softly. Kota shook his head. I just wanted to see my hero and thank him. I know you've been secretly protecting me this whole time." Izuku blinked, caught off guard. "I'm not a hero," he said simply. "I only protected my forest." "That doesn't matter," Kota said firmly. "My mom always told me that a hero's job is to save people who can't protect themselves. You protected us, not just me, but the forest, the animals, and even the people you don't know. That makes you a hero." Izuku was silent, watching Kota as the boy clenched his small fists. "When Mama and Papa died, I was angry," Kota continued, his voice trembling. "I hated that they sacrificed themselves for people they didn't even know. But then you saved us, even though you never spoke to us before. And I think I understand now." Tears welled in Kota's eyes, spilling down his cheeks. "I was so scared, but when you showed up, I wasn't afraid anymore." Izuku listened quietly. He had never been thanked before. He always lived his life in solitude. But when Kota suddenly threw his arms around him, clinging to him tightly, Izuku found himself unable to move. A human child was thanking him. A human child was holding on to him, not in fear, not in desperation, but in gratitude. Izuku didn't know what he was feeling, but for the first time in a long while, he let it be. After a while, Kota finally calmed down, his small hands releasing their tight grip on Izuku's shirt. He sniffled and wiped his face with his sleeve before looking up at Izuku, embarrassed. Sorry for crying on you," he mumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. Izuku shook his head. "There is no need to apologize." Kota hesitated for a moment, then gave a small nod. He still felt a little embarrassed, but hearing those words made him feel just a little lighter. I have to go now, Kota said after a brief silence. I'm going with Aunt Mandalay to you, eh? They said I'll be safe there while they go on their mission but will come back later. Izuku watched him for a moment, his green eyes thoughtful. So the heroes were heading out soon, leaving Kota in a secure place while they went to retrieve the kidnapped students. A part of him had already suspected this. As Kota turned to leave, Izuku raised his hand, his palm facing upward. A soft, green glow pulsed from his skin, and before Kota's wide eyes, a small, delicate lotus flower began to bloom right in the center of his palm. The petals unfurled gracefully, shimmering with an almost ethereal light, as if infused with the very essence of the forest itself. Izuku gently plucked the flower and held it out to Kota. Take this, Izuku said. Keep it with you. It will protect you. Kota blinked in surprise, looking down at the flower before carefully taking it into his hands. It felt warm almost as if it were alive. Really? Kota asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. Izuku gave a small nod. It holds a piece of my energy. If you ever feel lost or afraid, hold it close. Kota clutched the flower tightly, a small, genuine smile appearing on his face. Thanks, Mr. Guardian. I'll take good care of it. Call me Izuku. With one last glance at Izuku, Kota turned and started heading back. Izuku watched as the boy disappeared into the trees, his small figure blending into the forest's vastness.